exclusive interview with Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. There he is speaking to Iowa Republicans last weekend as part of the unofficial kickoff to 2016. And it's looking like that appearance was a success. Check out these brand new poll numbers this morning. In an Iowa survey from the Des Moines Register and Bloomberg, Walker is now the top GOP pick among likely caucus goers. He jumped from just 4 percentage points back in October. And in our Facebook Centimeter, look at how his buzz online jumped after that speech in Iowa. Governor Walker is our exclusive live guest after this from ABC's Jonathan Karl.
He's the one who took on the labor unions in a fight that gave birth to the Occupy movement. Now Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker hopes to stand out among a crowded field of 2016 hopefuls.
In America, we value our independence from the government, not our dependence on it.
He got rave reviews at last week's Freedom Summit in Iowa.
That sounded like a presidential campaign speech, at least the beginning of it.
Well, we've been tested in Wisconsin, there's no doubt about that.
And we're looking for good leadership, and we'll see what the future holds.
And has become the newest favorite of the conservative media.
Scott Walker wowed them in Iowa. He is the blueprint for the Republican Party. Scott Walker has shown how to do it.
Walker won 3 elections in just 4 years in Wisconsin, a state that hasn't voted Republican in a presidential election in over 3 decades. Back in 2013, he told me the next Republican nominee should be somebody, well, like Scott Walker.
So describe for me the ideal Republican presidential candidate in 2016.
I think both the presidential and the vice presidential nominee should either be a former or current governor. You can't reform Washington from within.
For this week, Jonathan Karl, ABC News, Washington.
Mitt Romney, dropping out this week, said, "I believe that one of our next generation of Republican leaders who may not be as well known may well emerge as being better able to defeat the Democrat nominee." Is he talking about you?
Well, I think there's a whole number of people. I mean, folks like my friend Marco Rubio, I think, fit that bill as well. But I think what he's heard is what I've heard across the country is that people want new, fresh leadership with big, bold ideas and the courage to act on it. And if we're going to take on a name from the past, which is likely to be former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, I think for the party we need a name from the future.
But how do you stand out in that enormous field of GOP hopefuls?
Well, I think as your introduction showed, I mean, people can say something. You can give speeches all you want. But I think what we have is not only amongst Republican voters, but in our state, even with independents, people want people to lead. They don't need to agree with you 100% of the time on every issue, but they're so sick and tired of politicians in both parties, particularly in Washington, who say one thing on the campaign trail and do something else. I think those 100,000 protesters 4 years ago who came in and around our Capitol showed if we think we're doing the right thing for the people, it doesn't matter what the intimidation factor, we'll stand up and stand up for them.
Okay, as you've seen on our show today, there are enormous foreign policy challenges going ahead, which the next president will inherit. One of your potential rivals for the GOP nomination, Senator Marco Rubio, said a governor with eyes on the presidency could acquire a global strategic vision, but that taking a trip to some foreign city for 2 days does not make you Henry Kissinger. I think you met with Henry Kissinger yesterday, but what would you say in response to Governor Rubio?
I did actually have the honor not only...
Senator Rubio, sorry.
No, and Marco's a great guy. I think the senator's got great vision. I look at, actually this weekend got to see not only Henry Kissinger, but former Secretary of State George Shultz, who I'm a great admirer, and even Madeleine Albright, who I think very highly of on foreign affairs. Governors don't just take trips. As a governor, I've had risk assessments given to me by the FBI and my adjutant general about threats not only in my state but around the country. That's one of the reasons why I'm so worried about the future, not just of our country, but our world.
Let's talk about some specific. And you talk about leadership, and you talk about big, bold, fresh ideas. What's your big, bold, fresh idea in Syria?
Well, I think I go back to the red line.
Let's not go back. Let's go forward. What's your big, bold idea?
I think aggressively we need to take the fight to ISIS and any other radical Islamic terrorists in and around the world, because it's not a matter when they attempt an attack on American soil, or not if, I should say, it's when. And we need leadership that says clearly, not only amongst the United States, but amongst our allies, that we're willing to take appropriate action. I think it should be surgical.
You don't think 2,000 airstrikes is taking it to ISIS in Syria and Iraq?
I think we need to have an aggressive strategy anywhere around the world. I think it's a mistake.
Well, what does that mean? I don't know what aggressive strategy means. If we're bombing and we've done 2,000 airstrikes, what does an aggressive strategy mean in foreign policy?
I think anywhere and everywhere we have to go beyond just aggressive airstrikes. We have to look at other surgical methods, and ultimately we have to be prepared to put boots on the ground if that's what it takes. Because I think,
boots on the ground in Syria? U.S. boots on the ground in Syria?
I don't think that's an immediate plan, but I think anywhere in the world...
You wouldn't rule that out?
I wouldn't rule anything out. I think when you have the lives of Americans at stake and our freedom-loving allies anywhere in the world, we have to be prepared to do things that don't allow those measures, those attacks, those abuses to come to our shores.
Let me turn to domestic issues and immigration. We know you want to fix the border and fix the immigration system, but what would you do about the 11 million undocumented who are still here?
Well, I think for sure need to secure the border. I think we need to enforce the legal system. I'm not for amnesty. I'm not an advocate of the plans that have been pushed here in Washington. And I think, should I become a candidate, because I'm not yet, it's part of the exploratory process here. That's something we're going to lay out, plans for the future. But we've got to have a healthy balance. We're a country both of immigrants and of laws. We can't ignore the laws in this country. We can't ignore the people who come in, whether it's from Mexico or Central America.
But is deporting them possible?
Well,
you see deporting?
That's not what I'm advocating as well, but I do think...
You're not advocating.
I'm saying in the end, we need to enforce the laws of the United States, and we need to find a way for people to have a legitimate legal immigration system in this country, and that doesn't mean amnesty.
The Republican nominee could be in a race against Hillary Clinton. Let's just say it's you. Mm-hmm. What would you say to Hillary Clinton? What's the best case against Hillary Clinton?
Well, I think the biggest thing I hear from Americans applies both in the primary contest and I think in the general, if I were a candidate, if I ultimately had earned the nomination. And that is, I think people want to look to the future. They don't want to go back in time. We don't want to repeat what we've had in the past. We need a candidate not of the 20th century, but of the 21st century. Ironically, that's what her husband brought to the table in 1992 when he picked Al Gore.
What's the difference between those two candidates?
I think there's a clear difference. I think former Secretary of State Clinton embodies all the things that we think of Washington. She lives here. She's worked here. She's been a part of the Washington structure for years, not just as a Democrat, but across the spectrum. I think Washington represents the top-down, government knows best, go along to get it along mentality. I think Americans overwhelmingly want fresh new ideas that build the economy from the ground up, that put the power back in the hands of the people, not only at the state and the local level, but of individual Americans. I don't think they want government telling them what to do, and that's what I've been advocating for a long time.
I just want to end with, because we're talking about the Super Bowl today, and you and I were just talking a little bit about football. You played high school football. Your two sons played high school football.
Yeah, wide receiver.
They love football, but when you look at the concussions, when you look at what's happened, can you imagine saying to your grandchildren, yeah, go do that?
Well, I think in a state like Wisconsin, we actually have pretty good standards. My kids, even a few years ago, one of them had an early concussion and was out for 10 days. They let him back in until we had a full checkup. That actually should have happened a long time ago, and I'm hopeful in other states around the country will do that. I think all of us, a lot of us enjoy football. I'd enjoy it a whole lot more. As much as I enjoy talking to you, Martha, I'd enjoy it a lot more if I had...
If you were out there in Arizona?
Watching the Packers and take on the Patriots. But I still think, like anything in life, there's ways of doing it that are responsible, and I still think football can be responsible in America.
Okay, one last one. 99% chance you'll run?
Oh, I don't know that I take the odds. I just would tell you one thing. After 3 elections for governor and 4 years in a state that hasn't gone Republican since 1984 for president, I wouldn't bet against me on anything.
Thank you very much for joining us, Governor Walker. Coming up is the analysis from the roundtable.